Okay, so this is our second time in this session, and we've been learning the Maimer Mi Chamocha Be'elim Hashem Mi Chamocha Neder B'Kedesh. So this is the Maimer of the Red Marash. We started on that pasuk Mi Chamocha, and we started to examine that pasuk. That pasuk Mi Chamocha, who is like you, Be'elim. It clearly implies that who is like Hashem in the Elim, meaning in the supernal beings. That is to say that there are other supernal beings around, and God is one. But who is like you? You are the exalted one. But we asked, well, we are trying to understand. We see that the translation of the other targums discount this idea that there is any other existence except for God. In fact, the Onkelos translates it with the idea, "Les ba minoch," there is nothing else like you, which is like the translation of the pasuk, which we say at the beginning of the verse, "Ata reis ladas," which finishes off, "Ein od milvado." There's nothing else beside you. So therefore, the idea of Mi Chamocha is encapsulate this idea of Ein od milvado, that there's nothing else except for you, Hashem. But notwithstanding that, we know that the verses actually say, and the verses tell us that the world is in existence, that the Hashem created the world, and man created on it, as well as other supernal partners. There are other existences, spiritualities. Right? So what is exactly this idea of the meaning of Ein od milvado? That's where we're up to, and that's how we're understanding, moving on with the Maimer and trying to understand the Maimer. We quoted from the Rambam previously that the idea that of what does Mi Chamocha mean and what does Ein od milvado means, it means to say that there's no other truth in the world, there's no other existence like the truth of God's existence. And that existence is the primary existence. Hashem's existence and his mode of existence is the correct meaning of existence. And in fact, the Rambam, by virtue in his discussion, is trying to discount another idea, that is the idea which in Hebrew we talk about shituf. We talk about the idea of a partnership in creation. We ended up last time talking about that there does exist a partnership in creation. Every human being, and we quoted a passage in the Talmud that every human being is a partnership between a father and a mother and God. And even though Hashem is the primary partner in that creation, in the creation of human being, nevertheless there is a validity to it, that the partnership of a husband and wife, a man and woman, together producing a child, right? But and even though Hashem is the primary partner, giving in the spirit, but there are other partners. So this lends the idea that there does exist the idea of a shituf, the idea of partnership. Notwithstanding that, the Rambam is telling us that the partnership, the primary partner of the partnership is God. That there does exist this idea of shituf. Then we question whether what is the incumbentness of us to teach the idea or negate from non-Jews the idea of shituf. Certainly, we are commanded not to believe in shituf, and that is one of the commandments, one of the 10 commandments. We are told, and we have to understand that so the first two commandments of belief in God and not to believe in any false gods, the idea of Shittuk is disclaimed by us by the idea that there is a supreme being, and we not to believe in any other in any other false deities. So the idea of Shittuk is by us, is from the Jewish religion, and not, we don't believe in via the second commandment, the commandment of that there is no other gods besides Hashem, and therefore we don't therefore this is incumbent upon Jews to understand the idea of what that of what exactly it means that Hashem is a unit, is one. The idea of Hashem is one, being that which is the idea of the first commandment, that Hashem is one. Now, continuing that thrust, we learn that all peoples from the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach are not allowed to believe in Avodah Zorah, that is in false deities, idolatry, and this is the idea of Shittul, that we are not to believe in anything else in other gods. But Avodah Zorah, false gods, is derived from you should not have any other gods before me. Okay. So with this we can understand the teachings of our sages. The Medrash Rabbah, in Medrash Rabbah, Shishat Barim Nistabu Adam Arishon. There were 4 commandments that Adam Arishon, the first man, was commanded. And Be'echad Mehem, and one of that 6, is a commandment against Avodah Zorah, against idolatry. Now, the Reb Marash now continues with his halachic discussion of trying to find the source of whether non-Jews are required not to believe in Shittul. So what we've just determined is that Avodah Zorah, idolatry, they're not allowed to believe. However, we did say, there's these 2 ideas of, or 2, for a Jew, 2 aspects that he's not supposed to do. One is that he can't do idol worshiping. The other thing is that we are commanded against giving credence to Shittul, the idea that there is another thing beside a partnership with God, and that we believe that Hashem is the only existence that exists. What does exactly that mean, or where is that defined, right? So what was said was, well, and what he's saying at the moment is that if we are not to believe all the other commentaries which we mentioned before, who appeared to say that the Shittuk is the same thing as Avodah Zorah, that cannot be, because Adam Arishon is already told that he's not allowed to believe in idolatry and worshiping idols. So and that they are allowed to believe in Shittul, the idea of composite things. How can that be? And that's what he's discussing at the moment. That is Acha Inyan. He continues, how could it be that they would, so we were saying that rather, as we said earlier, Shittuk is not idolatry at all. Rather, it is like comparing God to a king who is a supreme ruler. Kim Kamei HaMelech Hu Echad Al Kol B'nai al kol b'nai midinoisenu makol mokom chelik koved. A ruler, a king who is a supreme ruler over his countrymen, but nevertheless grants honor. Mikol mokom, he gives koved lahasorim to other princes or other ministers. Asher makol midinois malchuso, who are in his kingdom. And further, he describes in the next section, he says, Be'emes last lava veda zoro uma posik lo yeh l'chol ekim acherem al panai. And in reality, the prohibition against idolatry is derived from the verse, you should have no other gods besides me. While the inyan ashitu, while the idea of the prohibition against belief in shittu derives from another verse, that is from the idea of, from the pasuk of Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, that Hashem is one. Chamocha Rambam, and that's like the Rambam and the Smag and Baro, Zechreinu Levracha, have written in B'minyan mitzvahs in their enumeration of the mitzvahs. I know that is ki mitzvahs liyachto, the idea of the belief of unity of Hashem. Yetze, it excludes the inyan has horas hashitu and behum posek Hashem echad, and it is derived from is deduced from the commandment to believe that God is one, which in turn is derived from the idea of Hashem is one. Our discussion then continues with the Maimon, because we've understood now that we have the idea of the belief against Shittuk and the differential between Avodah Zarah and Shittuk, the ascribing of some type of existence to the world other than God's existence. What exactly does that mean? We've said it derives from the idea that's embedded in the Shema of Shema Yisrael Hashem Echad. That the idea of Echad, the idea of that Hashem is one. So moving along that line, that's where we're going with the next couple of lines to understand a little bit better what's the implication of Hashem Echad. So he continues. Lahavin said to understand that Lahavin Mash Kosov the mitzvahs liyachta Hashem Echad. What does it actually mean when the idea of Echad, when we say that we have to believe that Hashem is one? L'chera im hayanema yochid. If the verse would have used the expression yochid, and yochid means only or singular, wouldn't have that been a better expression? Echad means one, and as we continue the discussion, im hayanema yochid, if our expression would have used the expression yochid hayamera al aftas yesa, it would have made us believe and made us understand the concept of unity in a better way, because the word yochid means singular or unique or only, that there is only one. But now that our verses use Hashem Echad, Hashem is one, we have to understand what it wants to imply via that. Because, and then what he says in the next lines, Ki Echad yesh gam Echad hamnuyim. Because when you say the word Echad, you also imply that there is some other numbers involved. When you say one, then that means if there's a one, there's a two, and there's a three, or any other numbers. But if I use the expression yochid, singular, unique, only, if I would say Hashem is only the only existence rather than Hashem is one, that implies the idea of unity in a stronger sense. So why does the verse use the word echad? And then so the Maimah continues. Hainu al derech moshel shifta Yisrael. For instance, when we talk about the tribes of Israel, shifta Yisrael, when we talk about the tribes of Israel, Shaya Yud Beis, there are 12 of them. But al pi Cain, nevertheless, each one of the tribes is considered a one tribe. B'afal pi Cain nikra echad mehem b'shem echad. That because when we want to uniquely describe a member of the tribe, we will say one of you. So Chamocha, like the verse says, at the time when a representative was to be sent from the tribes, the verse says, Sholchu mikem echad, send from you one of them. Achichem echad, you are brothers one. Hagam sheyesh sheni v'shlishi. So that tells us that even though that there is a second or a third, but one is one of them. Or like when we talk about the 6 days of creation, Shehem Sheshes Yomim, they were 6 days. B'afal pi Cain nikra rishon echad, and the first day is called echad. So that here is clearly some examples where when you use the expression one echad, we can understand that there are other comparable ones that might come in its train. So therefore we have the first day or the second day or the third day, as the verse talks about that there was an evening, there was a day, and that was one day, but that was considered one day, a numeric one day. And that's the idea of a number. And when I've got a number, as I said, we're implying that there can be other numbers. But if I would use the word expression yochid, singular, then if I would say Hashem yochid, Hashem is singular, then it implies to us that there is something special about that. It's unique. It's singular. There's nothing else like that. So that gives us the idea of Ein El Movade, that other verse that we were talking about. So our question returns, which we will return to it and express again, but our question returns, why doesn't the verse use, instead of Hashem Echad, use the word Yochid or something similar? And that's what he just continues with. And that's the idea when you talk about use the word echad as a counting number, which you cannot use in its implication when we talk about God, about spirituality, about a reference to God. So the imkain. Hashem Yochid. So if the verse would have actually used the expression Hashem Yochid, Hashem is one or singular, it would have implied or taught an idea more relevant to the idea of his unity. And this is taught in this similar question is expressed in other places. In the book called Torah, in the section starting off with the Eira. So, because we've got such a strong question, we must come to another conclusion, and that's what he continues with in the Maimon. So since this is what is since this is what's written in the verse, and we learn from this verse where we've said in our discussion before that we are not allowed to believe in any other existence besides of God, the idea of shituv. In that case, we learn from the idea against shituv from the verse which says Hashem Echad. It must mean that there is something implied, something very specifically implied in this expression, and I'll continue with his words. So in the verse which is actually teaching the idea of unity of Hashem, we dafka use the expression echad. There must be some sort of extra teachings and implication by virtue of using the word echad more within the concept, within the general concept and the general teachings of achdusa, of unity. And in that case, with tzarich lahavin mahu, so therefore, the Rebbe Marash asked the question: what is this deeper meanings that we have to understand from the expression echad that goes to the heart of the matter and in a deeper sense than if we would use the expression yochid? Okay, now the Rebbe will continue with a traditional teaching about the expression echad. We have a traditional teaching in the Talmud about the expression echad. And we'll continue. So, our rabbis taught us that kad amlichte lamailo, that once you acknowledge God's kingship, that he is lamaila or lamata, that he is king in the upper realms and in the lower realms, above and below, v'ladalad ruches, and into the four corners, the four directions. Tu'loid tzrichos, more than that is not required. Now that's a quote from the Talmud Brachos, from the Talmud, and there it's speaking about a requirement, halachic, the halachic requirement, or at least a minimum halachic requirement that one rabbi suggested to another rabbi. If you look in the note number 34, we can read that together. So the Talmud cites a brisa that says whoever prolongs pronunciation of the word echad has his days and years prolonged. So, and the Talmud then relates that Rabbi Yirmiyah prolonged his pronunciation of the word echad, so much so that he fell behind the congregation in his prayers, meaning to say that he would meditate on all the esoteric concepts alluded in the word echad. And he was told by Rabbi Chia bar Abba that while saying echad, it was enough to merely acknowledge God's sovereignty over the heavens and the earth and the four directions. This being the main idea alluded to in the word echad, as the Maimon will continue to teach. And how does it teach it? So let's go back to the main text. This sovereignty over the world is alluded to by the word echad. How is that? That the word echad, as written, is spelt with an aleph, a ches, and a daled. The aleph is numeric value 1, the ches is numeric value 8, and the daled is numeric value of 4. So what is the conceptualization of that? Continuing the test, that the ches teaches us that there exists 7 heavens and the land and the earth. Daled and the daled of echad teaches us the idea of the daled ruches elam. It refers to the 4 corners of the world, the physical world. V'hainu, that is, that ki hagam shenizav zayin rakim v'oretz. So even though there exists and there is spirituality in the heavens, in the 7 heavens and the earth, and in all daled ruchas ha'olam, on all 4 corners of the globe, im kol zeh, notwithstanding that there exists the realms of physicality and spirituality extending over the 4 corners of the world and in the heavens above and below, they are all im kol zeh heim batelim. They all of that does not contradict the exclusivity of Hashem's true existence as described by the Rambam. And in fact, they are all heim batelim. They are all insignificant, batelim, or they are nullified. Literally, you can translate batelim as nullified, right? They're all nullified, but tachlis, in an ultimate sense, that is, they have no contradiction, and they are not considered significant. The bechinas, to the level of the aleph, to the aleph. So the first letter of the word echad starts with an aleph, refers to 1, and the ches and the daled, which finishes that word, they all represent the manifestations of Hashem's creations in all the 4 corners of the globe and in the heavens above. But all of those creations are nullified. They certainly don't contradict, and in fact they are nullified in an existence comparative to the aleph, the echad, the oneness of Hashem. What does it mean, the one of Hashem? The one, that Hashem, the true existence. And as the text continues, Hu b'chinas Ein Sof, this is Hashem, how he is called the Ein Sof, who Alufah Shel Elam, who is the master of the world. He is the head of the world. Hamahavim, who created them. So we have now given a traditional understanding of the idea of echad, that within the name, within this word echad, there's the idea that although the other existences exist and Hashem created them, they are all incomparable to the idea of the aleph, of the echad. With this idea that we've just understood and been taught, we can understand other teachings that exist. For instance, we are going to we're going to quote now a medrash. How can we understand the idea of this, the idea that we've just expressed, which is the idea of the nullification of the creations to Hashem? What does that mean, and how can we understand it? How can we bring it closer to our perception and get a better idea of it? So the Rebbe Marash continues. V'bir inyan l'karav el haseichel, to explain the idea and make it more understood by ourselves. How could it be? Eicha elam. How is it possible that the elam umlaya, that the world and all its contents, which is real, which is in front of us, which exists, all the substances around us are all here. We know that they, certainly from our perception, we know that they exist. Nevertheless, we are being told that it's nullified in relationship to Hashem. So what does this mean? What does this mean? So we continue. What does it mean that they are nullified in respect to the Ein Sof Baruch Hu? How that it is nullified to God, who we are using the expression Ein Sof Baruch Hu, the infinite light, blessed be He. How are we to understand it? There's a teaching in a section of the oral law, which is the collected sayings and the teachings of a famous person who lived in the times of the Talmud, Rabbi Lazar. He lived in the times, in particular, of the Mishnaic times. And he taught as follows: Ha'oretz, the land, Mahechen Nivrois, from where was the world created? Now, obviously, well, just to say a little precursor to the words of our teachers, of our sages, for us to understand them, they utilize ordinary terms and words so that terms that we are familiar with, but they're not to be taken literally. So similarly, in this quote that we're going to give, the words that he's using are not to be taken literally, and we have to understand what they mean, which the Rebbe Marash will help us along. But the quote is as follows: from where was the world created? It was created from Mesheleg Tachas Kisei Yaakov, from the snow that was beneath Hashem's, God's throne of glory. It was also created, that is Ma'ofa Shiba Nasa Oretz. The land was formed from the dirt and the mountains and that created the land, and Sararim, and from its pebbles, Nasahorim, mountains were created. And the source of that, Shenema says, Kilashelek Omar, because Hashem said, as is written in Eov, in Job, that he said, the Shelek Omar Heve Oretz. He told the snow, become the earth. Now that's the quote. Now we're going to examine this quote and try to understand it. Why is even this teaching starting with the idea of from where was the world created? Don't we know from the passages of the creation narrative in the beginning of the Torah, Halahu Nivras Ma'ain Liyesh, we know the earth was created from a state of nothingness to a state of something. God created it. Va'afilu Chekrin, and even philosophers made in Bezer agree to this. The ancient philosophers, Chamocha Harasag, as the famous author, the famous Jewish author, great philosopher of Egyptian times, who we have works from him, Rabbi Sadia Gaon, who lived in the early post Talmudic times, lived 892-942 CE, and he was from the greatest leaders of Jewry in his time. So, as the Rasagas of Sadia Gaon writes, "Be'inyan Habri in relation to creation, Shenibra Dobe Mole Doba," that the world was created from something to nothing, and it was created in its fullness. So, Mao Inyan Ashayla Mahechan Nibros. So, what does this mean in the Pirkei de Rabbi Loza? What is it trying to answer us or tell us? This thing from what was it created? And in a similar passage is found somewhere else in the Medrash. Well, there say Yesh Medrash Rabbah. In the Medrash Rabbah, Gam Ken Shomer V'Seinu Zachreinu Bracha. We have a quote from Medrash Rabbah, which also says, in a similar light, in a similar style, it says Ha'ora, light. Mahechon Nivras, where it was created. And it continues in Malama, and it says, it says that Hashem wrapped himself up in a white talus, and Vahebik Ziv Hadora, and then in that state, he radiated brilliance of his glory. Of course, this is not understood in a simple sense. So that's what we continue to discuss. We have after a similar question. Maha Shaila, what does this mean? Mahechan Nibra, where was light created? Shenibra Yesh Ma'ayin, it was certainly created from nothing to something. And it's specifically expressed in the statements in the creation narrative, because Hashem says, it says in the early verses, it says, that Hashem says, let there be light. And that's one of Shabbat Mamoris, one of the 10 creative utterances that Hashem made in the creation narrative. So what does this mean, and how does it connect to our ideas of the question of echad? From this point, we're going to have a deeper discussion within the Mimer about aspects of creation according to the teachings of Chassidus. All aspects which of the physicality, the physical existence of creations, all the physical creations come from something. They have a spiritual source. They have some sort of spiritual source. As our sages say, so there is an expression. There is an expression in our teachings, in our oral Torah, quoted from Bereshis Rabbah, right? And that says that every object, even a blade of grass, so there's no substance. Even a blade of grass has a physical blade of grass it has a muzzle. We won't translate that yet for the moment, right? But it has a muzzle above, and the muzzle is a spiritual source, which we will discuss in the ensuing lines and after this. But the expression is that there is a muzzle in the heavens, more muzzle, more mila. There is a muzzle in the higher realms that continues and gives energy to the physical creation. In the expression, it's in the quote, it's used the expression hamakaboy, that it strikes it and forces it, and tells it, Godal, you need to grow. That's the quote from the Medrash Rabbah. It's also similarly a quote in the Zohar. What is this teaching? This is the teaching that tells us that in a summary sentence, that everything in the physical realm has something in the spiritual realm which is its source and gives it energy to grow and to become from a cotton to a gadol, from something small to something large. That is to say that there is a spiritual entity which causes it to grow. The next lines continue this discussion. She'inyan a mazel. So what is a mazel? What is this idea of mazel? Hu sherish umaka. It is the source, the spiritual source, the root of hadesha. It's the root of the objects from below. In this particular case, we're speaking about vegetations, hadasha ve'esev, of the vegetation and the grass of Sameach Lamata, which grows in the physical realm, Ad shegavoya, till it grows to a height, Ma'al gavoya, and it grows and continues to grow. And what are they? Haim HaMalochim. They are Malachim. They are the angels, the spiritual entities, Shenikroim B'Shem Desha Ve'esev. They are the proxy or the equivalent of the grass and the objects below in a spiritual form. So they are called the Malachim, they are called the angels, which are called or with the appellation with the and share the characteristic of vegetation below. Chamocha kosu, and this vegetation which below, which grows, and a reference to this idea is found in a verse, in a mention in a verse where the Zohar teaches a verse. As is written in the Zohar, be'inyan matzmiach chotzir lebehemo be'esev la'avodas ha'odo. That the verse which expresses in our Tehillim the idea that Hashem causes matzmiach chotzir lebehema, that Hashem causes that vegetation, foliage grows for the benefit lebehema, for an animal, the asev, and there is grass grown for la'avodas ha'adam, for the usages of man, for the work of man. The verse in itself refers to V'heima Malachim, that refers to the angels, Shenikroim B'Shem Yetzer, Meshosim. This refers to the angels which are called the Yetzer Meshosim. They are called, Hashem is called the creator of ministering angels. And these angels, She'emrim Shira B'chol Yom, these angels say and sing praises for Hashem every day. And they become included and nullified to the level of ayin, to the level of nothingness of the divinity, to the level of capital N, nothingness, to the sublime aspects of godliness. But Asher Mashosov, and they stand and serve, meaning to say, She'emdim, they have stood Berum Elam, they have the angels, the ministering angels have been standing in the heavens, Meshachas Yemei Bereshis, from the 6 days of creation, Chamocha Kosma Makamacha, as explained in other places. So to understand that a little bit better, let's go to and refer to the note where with the number 47, and let's read note 47 there. The Zohar states that foliage in the Zohar refers to angels that must be recreated each day, since they repeatedly escape their existence. What does that mean? He doesn't explain it over here, but let me assist, but what he means by that they have fulfilled their state of existence and they become absorbed into the state of nothingness. They become evaporated and absorbed because they've done their daily mission. That's the first part of the verse. And the second part of the verse refers to grass, refers to the ministering angels. This is a reference to the angels which we mentioned in our prayers in our daily prayers, the Seraphim, Oifanim, Achayas, who their existence doesn't become null, doesn't become um, 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 uh, destroyed, but they endure in their existence because they are designed for the upkeep of the world and mankind. And this is what's called the grass. And they aspire. So going back to where we quoted, they expire because they aspire, right? So I'm using those English words. Those angels expire because they aspire to a higher sense of holiness, and so they become nullified and become absorbed into the level of ayin, and which is the idea of because we don't have a perception, it is a higher level of perception than ours, so therefore it is called the holy ayin, the holy nothingness, right? And that's note 48. It's called nothing because it is not perceivable by the created being. And this is the idea of that everything in the hierarchy of spiritual understandings has a source in the hierarchy, and this physical world being the lowest place of that hierarchy. Within the hierarchy, there exists higher echelon spiritual beings, and as we've said, everything on this physical plane has something which is causing it, giving it energies from the higher planes. With this knowledge and continued discussion, we'll come to a deeper meaning and deeper understanding in the concept of the echad that we've talked about. Going back to the idea of what we said the echad, that the daled, the four corners of the world and everything contained in the physical realm, and then the spiritual realm included in the idea of the ches being the seven heavens and the physical land, all of that is nullified and has no significance and is nullified in comparison to the level of the Aleph. So we have just been discussing that the hierarchy of the spiritual kingdom, starting from man below or the grass below in this world, that its representation in the hierarchy is the grass above, the angels which are giving them are the source of their existence and giving them energies and giving them the capability to continue, and there are angels which continue and expire, and there are some angels which continue and administer the world. That is a continuous plane of spiritual existence. All of that is nullified to the level of the one. The Maimon will then continue discussing more along of the existence and the spiritual existence of other of the spiritual within the spiritual realm. We'll continue this as we learn further.